You're standing on a front porch in the rain, watching your own son lock the door in your face. Your entire life fits into 2 old suitcases. You have less than $900 in your pocket and nowhere to go. That was me 6 years ago. Today, I'm standing in the biggest mansion in town, and my son is begging to move in with Memi. If you want to hear how a regular grandma went from homeless to millionaire, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. This is a wild ride, and it all started on the worst day of my life. Everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 72 years old now, and I've learned the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes the people who throw you away are actually setting you free to become something amazing. Let me take you back to October 15th, 2012. I was 60 years old. My husband had just died, and I was living with my son James and his wife Jessica. I thought I was helping them out, taking care of their 2 little kids, helping with the bills from my small retirement check. I thought that's what families did during hard times. Boy, was I wrong. Mum, we need to talk. James said those words on a Tuesday morning. His voice sounded cold, like I was a stranger, not the woman who raised him all by herself after his dad walked out when he was 8. Jessica stood behind him with her arms folded across her chest. She had this mean little smile on her face that made my stomach hurt. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I asked. I put down my coffee cup on their kitchen counter. The same counter I'd helped pay for with my retirement money for the past year. "This arrangement isn't working anymore," Jessica announced. She stepped forward like she was the boss of everything. "You're too old-fashioned, Maggie. The kids are getting confused about who's in charge around here." I looked at James, waiting for him to stand up for me. I was his mother. I'd worked 3 jobs to raise him after his dad left. I'd driven him to baseball practice twice a week for years. I'd stayed up late helping him with homework. I'd sacrificed everything for him. But James just stared at the floor like I was a homeless person asking him for spare change. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked. My voice came out small and shaky. "That's not our problem anymore," Jessica said with a little shrug. "You're a grown woman. You'll figure something out." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. 20 minutes later, my entire life was packed into 2 beat-up suitcases and 1 cardboard box. 60 years of memories, family photos, and precious keepsakes, all crammed into what I could carry in my arms. Jessica told me cheerfully that everything else would be donated to Goodwill. Like my memories were just junk taking up space in her house. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," James mumbled as he carried my bags to the front porch. For just 1 second, I saw a flash of the little boy he used to be. The one who would cry when I left for work. The one who would hug me and tell me I was the best mom in the world. Then Jessica appeared next to him, and his face went completely blank. Rain started falling as the taxi pulled up. I climbed in without looking back. Not because I was strong, but because I was completely broken inside. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Jessica through their living room window. She was already redecorating what used to be my bedroom. I had exactly $847 in my purse. No job, no home, no family who wanted me. What I didn't know was that this terrible, horrible, awful day would become the best thing that ever happened to me. The Sunset Motel on Route 9 became my home. And let me tell you, it was exactly as depressing as it sounds. $43 per night for a tiny room that smelled like harsh cleaning chemicals and sadness. But it had a roof over my head and a door that locked. After being thrown away like garbage by my own son, even that felt like a blessing. Mr. Patterson, the elderly man who worked the front desk, took pity on me after the first week. "You're different from our usual guests," he said quietly one morning, sliding an extra towel across the counter to me. Most people staying at the motel were construction workers between jobs or people running from their problems. I was just running from the crushing reality that my own son had discarded me like I was worthless. Those first mornings were torture. I'd wake up in that narrow, uncomfortable bed, and for just a moment, I'd forget where I was. Then reality would slam into me like a truck. No grandchildren's laughter. No family breakfast to cook. No warm hugs or good morning, Grandma. Just me alone in a depressing motel room with a broken air conditioner that made awful groaning sounds all night long. But here's the thing about me. I don't stay down for long. I never have. When James was little and we had absolutely nothing, I worked THREE jobs to keep us going. I cleaned office buildings at night. I worked at a department store during the day. I took in people's ironing on weekends. Surviving hard times wasn't new to me. I just had to remember how tough I really was. Every single morning, I walked to the public library. It had free internet, free air conditioning, and free access to job postings online. At 60 years old, let me tell you, nobody was lining up to hire me. But I wasn't looking for charity or handouts. I was looking for an opportunity to prove myself. After 4 days of searching and interviewing, I met Sarah Mitchell, the owner of Mitchell's Garden Center. "You have experience with bookkeeping?" Sarah asked during my interview. She was around my age, with dirt permanently under her fingernails and a straightforward, no-nonsense attitude that I immediately liked. 20 years of experience, I replied confidently. I handled all the financial records for my late husband's construction business. What I didn't mention was that, while sitting in her cluttered, disorganized office for just 10 minutes, I'd already spotted at least 3 ways she was losing money. Her inventory tracking system was a complete mess. She was overpaying her suppliers, and her prices hadn't been updated since 2008. "I have to warn you, the pay isn't much," Sarah said apologetically. $15 per hour, part-time work only. "When can I start?" I asked immediately. That first paycheck was $240. I treated it like I'd won the lottery. After 6 weeks of watching my tiny savings drain away like water circling a drain. Earning money again felt like I could finally breathe. The motel room slowly started feeling less like a prison and more like, well, home. I bought a small coffee maker at a thrift store. I hung up my few remaining family photos on the ugly beige walls. I even bought myself a small plant for the WINDOWSILL. If this was going to be my life now, I was determined to live it with dignity and grace. 3 months into my new job, I made an observation that would change everything. Sarah was literally throwing away thousands of dollars worth of plants every single year. Anything that didn't sell by the end of the growing season went straight into the dumpster. "It's just standard business practice," she explained with a resigned shrug when I asked her about it. "That's how the garden center industry works." But I saw something completely different. I saw opportunity hiding in that dumpster. "Wait, you want to do what with the dead plants?" Sarah asked me, staring at me like I'd lost my mind. "They're not dead," I explained patiently. "They're dormant. They're sleeping. With proper care and attention, most of them can be brought back to life and sold again." This conversation happened 8 months into my new life. By this point, I'd moved out of the depressing motel and into a tiny studio, apartment above Yepes pizza shop. The rent was $650 per month, which left me with only about $50 after buying groceries. But it was mine. Nobody could kick me out on a whim or decide I was too old-fashioned. Sarah let me take home 3 truckloads of dead plants that November. She probably thought it would teach me a harsh lesson about business reality. What it actually taught me was that I had a gift I never knew existed. My tiny studio apartment transformed into an indoor jungle almost overnight. Every windowsill was covered with pots. Every corner had planters. Every available surface held plants in various stages of recovery. I researched plant care on the library computers for hours every day. I watched countless YouTube videos about plant rehabilitation. I spent my evenings carefully nursing brown, wilted stems back to health, talking to them gently as I worked. Mrs. Chen, from the downstairs apartment, kept asking me in broken English if I was running some kind of illegal operation. Too many plants. She'd mutter suspiciously every time she saw me carrying another pot up the stairs. But by February, something absolutely magical started happening. Tiny green shoots began appearing on stems I thought were completely dead. Buds started forming. My cramped studio apartment was transforming into a lush, thriving jungle of healthy, beautiful plants. I had over 200 plants crammed into that tiny space. About 150 of them weren't just alive. They were absolutely flourishing. "Maggie, what the heck?" Sarah gasped when I brought the first batch back to the garden center in March. Her jaw literally dropped open. "These look better than when they were brand new. How did you do this?" "I told you they weren't dead," I said, trying my best to hide the huge smile spreading across my face. Inside, I was doing cartwheels and shouting with joy. This wasn't just about proving Sarah wrong. This was about discovering that I had a genuine talent, something valuable that could actually make real money. Sarah bought back every single plant from me for half the original retail price. In one transaction, I made $847, more than my entire first month's salary. But even more importantly, I'd found something that gave me purpose again. Something that made me feel valuable and needed. The following year, Sarah and I made our arrangement official and permanent. She would set aside all the unsellable clearance plants for me at the end of each season. I would rehabilitate them through the winter months. Then we'd split the profits 50-50 when we sold them in the spring. It wasn't exactly a massive business empire yet, but it was mine. I built it. I owned it. Word started spreading rapidly through the local gardening community. "That lady at Mitchell's can bring literally anything back to life," people would whisper to each other at garden club meetings. Soon, other garden centers from neighboring towns started calling me, asking if I'd be willing to take their clearance plants too. By the end of year 2, I was making more money from plant rehabilitation than from my regular bookkeeping job. I'd also moved to a larger apartment with a proper outdoor balcony. I'd even turned a section of Yepper's parking lot into an unofficial greenhouse area with his enthusiastic permission. But you know what the best part was? Every single healthy plant I saved felt like proof of something important. Being thrown away doesn't mean you're worthless. Some things, whether plants or people, just need the right care, the right attention, and the right person who can actually see their potential. James and Jessica had thrown me away, assuming I'd just wither up and disappear quietly. Instead, I was putting down strong, healthy roots in soil they never even imagined existed. By year 3, I realized I needed to stop thinking small and start thinking smart. I had a waiting list of garden centers wanting me to rehabilitate their plants. My apartment operation was bursting at the seams. My landlord had started charging me extra fees for excessive water drainage. And Yeppe was getting annoyed that customers kept asking if they could buy the beautiful plants covering his parking lot. "Maggie, you need a real commercial facility," Sarah told me firmly during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "And you need to start thinking bigger than just saving plants one pot at a time." She was absolutely right. But thinking bigger required money. A lot of money that I simply didn't have. My savings account had grown to about $15,000, which felt like an absolute fortune after starting with nothing. But it wasn't nearly enough to lease commercial space and buy professional equipment. That's when I met Eleanor Rodriguez at the Small Business Development Center. Eleanor was one of those sharp, Incredibly efficient women who could spot hidden potential from a mile away. You're not in the plant rehabilitation business, she told me after carefully reviewing my financial records. You're in the business of turning waste into treasure. That's a completely different conversation with much bigger possibilities. Eleanor helped me see something I'd been too close to notice myself. I wasn't just saving individual plants. I was solving a massive problem for the entire garden center industry. Garden centers all across the country were literally throwing away millions of dollars in inventory every single year because they didn't know how to effectively handle end-of-season clearance. What if you taught other people your method? Eleanor suggested excitedly. You could franchise the entire process. Take a percentage of their profits and scale the operation nationwide. The idea was absolutely terrifying and thrilling all at the same time. Me, a 63-year-old woman who'd been homeless just 3 years earlier, running a national business operation. But the financial projections, Eleanor, showed me were impossible to ignore. We spent 6 intense months developing a comprehensive business plan. The strategy was this. I would start with a proper commercial facility right here in Millbrook. I'd perfect the rehabilitation process down to a science. I'd document every single step. Then I'd begin licensing my method to other operators all across the country. The small business administration loan application was 47 pages long. I almost gave up 3 separate times trying to fill out all those complicated forms. But Eleanor pushed me through every single section, helping me clearly articulate why this wasn't just some crazy plant lady's weird hobby. This was a legitimate solution to a very real, very expensive industry problem. Mrs. Williams, the loan officer said during my final interview, looking skeptical, your financial projections seem extremely optimistic. I leaned forward, looked him straight in the eye, and spoke with absolute confidence. Sir, 3 years ago I was living in a motel room with less than $1,000 to my name. Last year, I turned $50,000 worth of dead plants into $200,000 in actual revenue. I'd say my track record speaks for itself. The loan officer blinked at me for a moment, then slowly nodded. The $150,000 loan approval letter arrived on a Tuesday in March. Signed those papers in Eleanor's office with my hands shaking, barely able to believe I was now responsible for more money than I'd ever imagined possible. Within 6 months, everything fell into place like magic. I leased a 5,000 square foot warehouse on the outskirts of town. I hired 2 enthusiastic part-time employees. I established contracts with 15 garden centers across 3 different states. Phoenix, plant recovery, because everything deserves a second chance, was officially born. The irony wasn't lost on me for even a second. My son had thrown me away thinking I was completely worthless. Now I was building a business empire based entirely on proving that nothing is ever truly worthless if you know how to see its potential. 5 years later, massive success by year 5. Phoenix Plant Recovery had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We were operating in 12 states. We had 47 licensed operators running their own Phoenix locations. And I just signed a huge consulting contract with Home Depot's regional headquarters. The scared, broken woman who'd been thrown out like garbage was now being flown first class to corporate meetings in Atlanta, Georgia. Mrs. Williams, your success story is exactly what our industry desperately needs to hear, said David Chen, Home Depot's sustainability director, as we toured their flagship store. Turning waste into profit while simultaneously helping the environment, that's the future of retail. I smiled politely, still getting used to being treated like an expert and an innovator instead of an inconvenient burden. The transformation hadn't been easy. Don't get me wrong. There had been plenty of brutal 18-hour workdays, failed experiments, moments when I genuinely wondered if I was in way over my head. But every single challenge taught me something valuable about business, about myself, and about what I was truly capable of achieving. That my personal life had stabilized and improved dramatically too. I'd moved into a beautiful, two-bedroom apartment in Millbrook's historic district, complete with a private garden where I could test new rehabilitation techniques. I'd made real friends, not people who just tolerated me out of family obligation. My weekly book club with Eleanor and 3 other incredible women had become the absolute highlight of my social calendar. The financial success was staggering, even to me. Phoenix Plant Recovery was generating over $2 million in annual revenue. My personal net worth had crossed the 7-figure mark. I kept detailed financial spreadsheets, not because I was obsessed with money, but because those numbers represented something much more important. Independence, freedom, proof of my worth. The house hunting began as a simple practical decision. It ended as an act of pure, beautiful, poetic justice. After 5 years of apartment living, I legitimately needed more space for my expanding business ventures and growing investment portfolio. What I found instead was the absolutely perfect way to announce to the entire town of Millbrook that Margaret Williams was no longer a woman anyone could throw away. The Harrison estate? Jennifer Walsh, my realtor, repeated when I mentioned the property. Her eyes went wide. Maggie, that house hasn't been on the market in 40 years. It's the most prestigious, expensive address in all of Millbrook Heights. Millbrook Heights, the fancy neighborhood where James and Jessica had always dreamed of living but could never, ever afford. The neighborhood they'd drive through on lazy Sunday afternoons, pointing at houses and fantasizing about someday, while living in their modest little colonial with the mortgage they'd kicked me out to afford. Is it currently for sale? I asked simply. Well, yes, but ... Jennifer hesitated nervously. Maggie, the asking price is $4.2 million. Let's go take a look. The Harrison estate was absolutely everything I'd hoped for, and more. 12,000 square feet of stunning colonial architecture, sitting on 8 perfectly manicured acres. A master bedroom suite with its own fireplace. A library with floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookshelves. A professional chef's kitchen that could easily feed a small army. And a gorgeous conservatory that was basically a greenhouse attached to the main house. But what really sold me, what made me absolutely certain this was the house, was the view from the master bedroom window. You could see the entire town of Millbrook spread out below like a map, including the modest middle-class neighborhood where James and Jessica lived. Every single morning, I could wake up in my luxurious bed and literally look down on the people who'd looked down on me. The sellers are very motivated, Jennifer explained as we toured the impressive wine cellar. They've already relocated to Florida and want a quick, clean closing. Cash offer, I said without even a moment's hesitation. $3.8 million. Close in 2 weeks. Jennifer nearly dropped her expensive briefcase. Maggie, are you absolutely sure? That's an enormous commitment. I was more than sure. Phoenix Plant Recovery was throwing off enough profit to easily cover the mortgage payments. My investment portfolio had grown to the point where I could afford the down payment without even touching my business accounts. But more than that, I could afford it because I'd earned every single penny through my own intelligence, determination, and relentless hard work. The sellers accepted my offer within 6 hours. 2 weeks later, I stood in the grand entrance foyer of my new home, holding the keys in my trembling hands, trying my absolute hardest not to laugh out loud at the beautiful absurdity of it all. 6 years earlier, I'd been sleeping in a depressing motel room with less than $1,000 to my name. Now, I own the most expensive house in the entire county. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:17. a.m. on a Saturday morning. It was exactly 24 hours after the real estate transfer hit the local newspaper. Was in my enormous new kitchen, still trying to figure out which cabinet held the coffee mugs, when I heard that familiar two-tone chime echoing through my marble foyer. Through the security camera monitor. Yes, my house came equipped with a security system that would make Fort Knox jealous. I saw them standing on my front porch. James looked older, grayer around the temples, wearing khaki pants and a polo shirt that screamed, "Weekend Dad trying too hard." Jessica stood beside him in expensive designer jeans and a blazer that probably cost more than my first month's rent at Yepper's Pizza. Behind them stood two teenagers I barely recognized. Emma, now 16, had inherited her mother's sharp facial features. Tony, 14, looked like a taller version of James at that age. I took my sweet time walking to the front door. My bare feet were silent on the heated marble floors. 6 years of complete silence. And they show up the very day after discovering I'm rich. The timing was so perfectly, predictably transparent, it was almost funny. Well, I said, opening the main door but deliberately keeping the screen door closed and locked. James, Jessica, and 2 children I barely even know. To what do I owe this completely unexpected pleasure? Mom, James's voice cracked slightly. We read about the house in the newspaper this morning. We wanted to come congratulate you. How incredibly thoughtful, I said dryly. Congratulations delivered. Anything else? Jessica stepped forward with that bright, fake, plastic smile I remembered so painfully well. Maggie, we know things ended badly between us 6 years ago. We've had a lot of time to reflect, and we realize now that we handled everything completely wrong. Handled everything wrong, I repeated slowly, letting each word hang in the air. Is that what we're calling it now? Emma shifted uncomfortably behind her parents. Grandma Maggie, I barely remember you at all. But Mum and Dad told me you used to make the most amazing chocolate chip cookies. The girl's innocent comment hit me harder than any of her parents' carefully practiced apologies. She was absolutely right. She barely remembered me because they'd cruelly stolen 6 entire years of her childhood from both of us. 6 years of birthdays and school plays and bedtime stories and precious grandmother-granddaughter. Moments that we could never, ever get back. I did make excellent cookies, I said softly, looking directly at Emma, before I was thrown out of their house like garbage. Mom, please, James begged. Can we come inside? Can we just talk? Talk about what, exactly? Jessica's carefully maintained mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, revealing the cold, calculating woman underneath. We're family, Maggie, she said with forced sweetness. And family should stick together and support each other. Especially when, she gestured vaguely at the massive mansion behind me, when there's clearly plenty of room for everyone. There it was, the real reason for their sudden visit, delivered with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the face. Room for everyone, I mused out loud. How incredibly convenient that you've suddenly discovered your deep family feelings now that I happen to own 12,000 square feet of luxury real estate. That's not fair, James protested weakly, but I noticed his eyes were already greedily cataloguing everything he could see of the expensive house interior. We've missed you, Mom. The kids have missed having a grandmother in their lives. I actually laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. The absurdity was just too much. James, honey, you threw me out of your house with 2 beat-up suitcases and a cardboard box. Jessica told me I was too old-fashioned, and that figuring out my life wasn't your problem anymore. And now, suddenly you miss me. The awkward silence stretched on and on until Tony spoke up. Dad, what is she talking about? Why won't anyone explain what actually happened 6 years ago? Come inside, I said finally, stepping back from the door. Since you're also very interested in family reunions. I led them through the impressive entrance foyer, past the sparkling crystal chandelier and sweeping marble staircase, into the spacious living room with its dramatic floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured grounds. I watched their faces carefully as they took in the hand-painted silk wallpaper, the authentic Persian rugs, the museum-quality artwork that cost more than most people's cars. "This place is absolutely incredible," Tony breathed, walking slowly to the massive windows. "Mom, look! There's a pool. And a tennis court." Jessica was definitely looking, all right. I could practically see the calculator running in her head, computing square footage and property values. "It's certainly very spacious," she said carefully, trying to sound casual. "Much, much too big for just one person living here alone." "Is it?" I settled comfortably into my favorite chair, a beautiful navy blue velvet wingback that I'd bought specifically for this room. "I find I quite enjoy having space to breathe freely." James perched nervously on the edge of my expensive sofa, like he was terrified of wrinkling the fabric. "Mom, about what happened 6 years ago. We were dealing with tremendous stress at the time. We had a brand new mortgage. My job situation was extremely uncertain. Jessica was working full-time while trying to manage 2 small children. So naturally," I interrupted coldly, "the obvious solution was to make your recently widowed mother completely homeless." "Very logical thinking. We honestly thought you'd figure something out," Jessica said defensively. "You've always been so capable, so independent and resourceful. We never imagined you'd actually end up living in a cheap motel." I raised one eyebrow. "You never imagined it because you never once bothered to check on me or find out." Emma was studying a framed family photograph on the side table. It showed James as a young boy, maybe 8 years old, sitting on my lap while I read him a bedtime story. "Dad, you were really little," she said softly. "That photo was taken right after your grandfather abandoned us," I told her. "Your dad and I lived completely alone together for 10 years. I worked 3 different jobs simultaneously just to keep us afloat financially. I made absolutely sure he had everything he needed for school. I drove him to baseball practice every single Tuesday and Thursday for years, no matter how exhausted I was." I looked directly at James. I genuinely thought all of that meant something.